How's everyone doing? So, Strength Chat episode 60, and today I've got a very special guest for you. Today I'm joined by a multiple British powerlifting champion. He has an absolute monster bench press. He's also a coach himself and a nutritionist. Today I'm joined by Owen Hubbard. How are you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks, mate. Yourself?
Yeah, not bad, steady away. What have you been up to? What have you been working on at the minute?
Just into the usual things of, coaching clients, that sort of stuff. And obviously just literally this week started my prep towards Worlds in June. Okay. So yeah, like this week's literally the start of that basically, but same old.
Okay. How's the plan looking leading up to Worlds then? How's everything looking for that?
Yeah, pretty exciting actually. I've had a couple of months where I've just sort of been not treading water, but just building a base really ready for this phase. Like the strength guys do my coaching, which I think you've had on your show before, right?
Yeah, so I chatted with Jason Tremblay, which was quite an interesting chat.
Yeah, so Jason and Alfred do my programming, so we've spent a couple of months just getting into the swing of it, and now from this week, exciting. I'm looking forward to, like 83s is such a competitive weight class now, and like for me, if I'm not totaling over 800 by Worlds, I don't expect to medal basically. So okay. It gotta put the graft in now, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So how much say do you have in the plan going forward? Obviously, as a coach yourself, do you sit down with Jason and Alfred and you all sort of thrash it out for the plan going forward?
Yeah. It's I think like coaching in itself is, I think every cycle you'll do with a coach, the better it gets. Like I say that with my guys as well. Like this first cycle we do is on theory of what you've given me in the past, but I don't know how you work both on like, the handling volume, but also on sort of like psychological side as well.
Yeah.
And that's what I definitely think that this cycle is going to be a big one, is like we've taken their side of, they're very into their volume tracking and everything is by the book. But for me, it's like, because I have that intensity in my training, like doing 4 sets of 6 is absolutely kills me, because like it's so boring. Yeah. Where if you said to me to do a set of 12, then 2 sets of 6, all on the same weight, same amount of volume, I would much prefer that. Yeah. Where I know I have other guys who like that would kill them off. So yeah, I'm excited for this cycle, because I think we've got moving forward, we've got a nice balance of like using my intensity as well as sticking to the numbers prescribed.
Okay. How long have you worked with the strength guys then?
So I started with them after Worlds last year. Like I programmed myself into Worlds last year, which was, it worked really well. Like training went awesome. I hit quite a big PB, 777. But when you do coaching for 20, 30, 40 other people, the last thing you want to do sometimes is program yourself as well. So like I chose those guys because I really like what they do with like Taylor Antwood and that sort of stuff. They seem to have that ability to take good lifters to that next level. Yeah. And yeah, it's been good so far. I just think this peak is basically, we've sort of been in the thought of, right, we have a 12-month cycle basically, and all of it is going to lead up to being the best I can be at Worlds. So even at Euros, I don't think I was at 100%. It was, things went well, but like it was more building, and then hopefully at Worlds we'll put on a good show.
Yeah. So Euros was a stepping stone to Worlds this year.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Well, you'll be definitely 100% looking forward to seeing you lift at the World and seeing what you can do. For anyone listening who might not necessarily know your background, and obviously going to compete at Worlds this year, do you just want to give a little bit of a background to yourself?
Yeah. So I started powerlifting when I was like 15, I think, 14, 15. So I've been lifting for 11 years now, which is mad to think. I started lifting, just general training, and then enjoyed the powerlifting side, so got more and more into that. I've always been a good bencher. Like my first comp, I hit 125 squat, 110 bench, 145 deadlift.
Okay.
So like I've always been a good bencher. And then I just built up from there. You know, started in equipped lifting because there was no raw lifting when I started. And then once raw came in, I sort of realized how good I was at that compared to equipped. Like, you know, I at the time I was benching say 180 raw, I could only do like 205 in a shirt. Where I see guys doing 240 in a shirt when they can't bench 160 raw. So I was like, well, I'm probably more suited to this. And it just went from there really, and then competed. 1, 2, 3. This will be my fifth worlds this year. So well, raw worlds anyway. Probably my 7th worlds overall, maybe if I counted both. And just sort of kept plugging away at it. You know, like it's just consistency. You know, 3rd is my best, but I've also come last on a world stage when I very first started. So. You know, so just chipping away at it, basically.
Do you still get excited to compete at Worlds? Obviously, you know, the more you get there, do you still sort of get nervous and excited about competing at Worlds?
Yeah, I definitely think like the only time now that I perform well is on an international platform, whether it's Worlds or Europeans. Like I like being that the best thing I can be is like Calgary played right into my hands because I got to Calgary for Worlds and I was nominated like 6th, I think.
Okay.
And no one really expected me to do anything. And that's where I sort of thrive, where I can go in and go, right, I'm going to prove you lot wrong, basically. From there, that's what, so I'm hoping that this year Worlds will be, I can do the same thing, basically.
Yeah. Nice, yeah. You know, is that thing. You know, if someone says you can't do something, it gives sort of like to fire up your ass a little bit more to be like, okay, let's see how it goes.
It's the best thing you can say to me.
So, how did you transition then, or get involved in the coaching and the nutrition side of things as well? How did that come about? Was that always the plan, or was it a natural crossover from lifting yourself?
Yeah, I think so. Like nutrition was always my plan. Like I went to uni to do my degree in nutrition, and I always wanted to do the nutrition side of things. And then through uni, and as I finished uni, I was like, well, I enjoy the coaching side of it, and let's just start doing a little bit more of that. And it's just one of those things where you do it and you realize you're quite good at it. And like, I think one of the best things you can have from a coach is not so much like, they're amazing, they can lift, but they understand the sport. I think that's quite a big difference sometimes between like, especially on game day or leading up to it and peaking. Like I feel like I've got that wealth of knowledge on that side of things, sort of understanding when to push on, when to pull back, that sort of stuff, and I do like that much more personal approach of just trying to figure out the lifter rather than the statistics, Okay. And that's the side of coaching that I enjoy. I enjoy like, communicating with my lifters and being right, almost down to the little things of just like the way they're talking to me in that week. And like, I have some guys who I know if their feedback is that their language is much more positive, I'm just going to go, right, we're going to push you harder than what was originally planned, because they're not usually like that. Versa. So that's the bit of coaching that I really love. And that's why I don't really do, I don't do like, this is your 12-week plan, off you go. Like I'll always go week on week and make sure I get a check-in, because that's the fun part, in my opinion.
I think that's the way that coaching is going. I know. I've only taken maybe a couple of people to competitions, but handling people on game day, it does come with experience. You've got to learn that a little bit more, and exactly as you say, sort of get a feel for the lifter. And when you're doing a week by week approach, so the powerlifting club that I run at the gym that I work out, it is mainly just for beginners, but I'll do it week by week, so that I can see, because they are beginners, they don't they'll respond to everything, but I don't know, they're a little bit slower to give me feedback on, oh, so how did this feel or anything like that. But if people are a little bit more experienced, sort of like maybe intermediate and, you know, elite levels, they're, like you said about the guys who are positive in the emails, right? Let's push you a little bit more, because they'll have a better feel for their body than, you know, a beginner, if you like.
Yeah. No, yeah, I definitely agree with that. Sure.
So you touched on it a little bit at the start about intensity. So obviously dubbed Mr. Intensity, if you like. How does, because, you know, you'll see everybody has their own sort of style. Some people are quite sort of get quite fired up and are loud in that way. Other people are a little bit quieter and keep it, you know, on the inside, if you like. How does intensity in training differ towards on the platform? Can it get a little bit mixed up, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think like the way I look at it is I look at whether it's myself or a lifter that I train, like look at their background as well and where their intensity comes from. Like my general background of training was doing a little bit of rugby when I was like 13, 14, 15, using the gym for that, and sort of bodybuilding type training. So when I very first started off, everything was like, go hard, go all the time, you know, 100%. And I think you can sort of learn intensity. Like your people use that analogy of like the rev counter, right? Of like, if you're smashing the rev counter really hard all the time, you're going to burn out. But for me, the intensity that I'm doing week on week, that might look like 20, like, you know, 100,000 revs to a lot of people.
Yeah.
But to me, that's hardly anything. I'm not out of first gear.
Yeah.
So I suppose it's more the lifter themselves and like selecting how often they can go into that intensity. And that can be fluid. Like, I definitely think that I'm a little bit more controlled with my intensity than I was, say, 3-4 years ago. Okay. It's a little bit more focused into the lift rather than just going mad anywhere. But I do find that now I can only hit that intensity maybe like say twice a week, which is still quite a lot. But like before, I could have done like 4 or 5 times, and it wouldn't have fazed me at all. So like me working at 90% with my intensity is the equivalent to someone who's a little bit more fragile, we'll say, working at like 80%. And I think the way I'll explain it to like my lifters is, you work out what your intensity is and how to do it. And, you know, like intensity is, whether it's external or internal, it's the same thing. You know, I choose to do mine externally because it helps me sort of tick off my cues in the way I'm setting up. It helps me create consistency. And that's the important part, is you need to find that optimum arousal that helps create consistency. And I definitely tailored mine for a long, like since I started lifting, like, and lifting raw like 4 or 5 years ago. But if you looked at the way I lift and did like a warm up versus a platform lift, it looks more intense, but the processes are still there, you know, of the way I'm setting up. I think that's where a lot of people go wrong, is they let the intensity take over and they're like, right, I'm going to do this. And then they forget about the structure of the way they set up. So yeah, it's finding that middle ground, basically. Yeah.
Do you find, you mentioned it a little bit there, you know, when people are going really like, you know, going mad, but then they forget about their setup and that sort of stuff. Is that, do you think that's a case of that they might have overshot a lift? Because obviously when we sort of separate in, you know, training and on the platform, in training, you should be aiming to, you know, nudge things up and maybe try and lift the weights that you know you can. And then on the platform, if it's, you know, maybe your third deadlift and you need to pull it out of the bag, really. Do you think sometimes it's because people are overshooting and it's not a fair reflection of how their training has been going, if they're going a little bit too far on the intensity scale?
Yeah, it can be, and it can be sort of like, yeah, like you're saying, but that's that tipping point, I suppose, and it's you got to find where you lie on that scale, because there's nothing worse than going completely mad and just forgetting all your cues, and then you might have been strong enough to lift that.
Yeah.
You know, or you know, vice versa. I have other lifters where I know, like, right, in training with very little hype, so deadlifts especially, like conventional deadlift pullers. Like I have some lifters where their best pull in training would be like 185. I know they're good for like 210 on comp day. Just it's just that intensity that the competition brings is a lot different to the intensity that you can get in the gym. Yeah. And I think some people are good at replicating it on both, and then other people struggle to get that feeling in the gym. Okay. And I think that's okay. I don't see that being a problem as long as you identify that. You know, like it's identifying that and then going, well, this comes back, I suppose, to where like volume tracking and data management is important, because if you know that you pulled 165 in the gym last cycle and you pulled 175 in comp and 165 felt the same speed as 75, but now this cycle you're pulling 70 in the gym, you can look back at last comp and then you'd be like, right, that's about where I'm at. So, right, it's combining the two really of like, you know, data management, but also that using your intensity on the platform and using it at the right time, you know? Yeah.
So with that, you know, on the other end of it, you know, when you mentioned in there about if someone can pull 185, but they can pull 210 in comp, how do you sort of find out whether people are, is that case, you know, they struggle to find that intensity in the gym, or they're just not pushing themselves? Because sometimes, you know, it can be easy to say, oh, well, I'm especially really far out from a competition, if you like. You know, you've still got to have that end goal of the competition, you know, X amount of weeks down the line. How do you sort of find out whether people are holding back a little bit, or, you know, they're just struggling to find intensity in the gym?
Yeah, that's like, that's where you just, the communication is key, right? Because you definitely, like, you probably know, you'll definitely find people who you're coaching who sandbag themselves 24/7. And however much you say to them, you got more in there. Like they you know that they might just be that sort of introvert character who isn't really the type of person to go, oh yeah, I could do more on that. But then also you have the other end of the scale where you have people, if you say like, oh, well, I want you to do a triple at RP8, they're just going to go balls out and call it an 8 no matter what. So, with that case, like, depending on the lifter, again, this goes on with, like, obviously with time with the lifter, but depending on the type of person they are, like, if you're the type of person who go balls out all the time, I'm not going to give you an RP a lot of times, because I know you're just, until you learn how to feel what it actually is, I'm not willing to give you the RP because I know what you're like, you know? So I get advantages to those people where if you're terribly undershooting a lot, I'll tend to give like an RP sometimes and be like, this is RP8. I know you'll go to a 7. So I might give you like a little bit of a range as a push to be like, right, this is roundabout where you're going to be between, say, 165 and 175. So at least then that they know that, right, this is where I need to be. And then eventually, once they learn that auto-regulation and they learn what to do, you can pull those numbers back, and that person then can understand what they're doing. So I think that's a big side of being a coach, is not just, right, these are the numbers you're doing this week. It's more getting them to understand as well what they're capable of, and whether that's on comp day or in the gym. Because if you're a big puller on comp day, deadlifts especially, like if you're a big puller on comp day, you need to identify that and not shit yourself when you're pulling 20 kilos less in the gym, and you're like, oh, how am I going to pull this on comp day? How does he expect me to pull this?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just all to do with communication, really, on that end of things.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting what you're saying about the RPE on there, because I'm only just starting to be like, oh, actually, yeah, this is an RPE 9, and people sussing it out. The actual communication with the clients and lifters, there was, I think it was actually last Monday? I had a woman come in, and I was like, right, I want you to try and hit an extra rep at the heavier weight that you've done. She didn't count the right amount of weight on the bar. So the week before, she'd done maybe, I think she did 65 or maybe 67 and a half. And then she put 75 on the bar and did it like really, really easily. And I just had to sort of say, what did you do last week? So I get them to record all the weights and the lifting. She said, oh, I did 65. I've done 75 for more reps. So I was like, yeah, 100%. Like, you know, it could be a fluke. It could be a fluke, but you know, you've added 10 kilos and you've done more reps. So either last week you were really, really tired, or you've just been taking it steady.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do find it interesting is just finding those lifters, but more so because she's a beginner, she doesn't know what strength she's got at the minute. It's just sort of she comes in and does the lifts. So it's just sort of finding out how she knows about how lifts are feeling and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and beginners, like using RP for beginners is like, it's a tricky thing to do because like you said, like they don't really know how many more they could have done because they haven't got that feedback, that internal feedback yet. But like I try and I'll after sort of 2-3 months with someone who's never used RP or they're quite a new lifter, I will say every once in a while, I'll be like, let's just see what you feel like an RPE is, because it's good. It might not be right, we're going to do an RPE 8 today, but it's more if we did a single at 90%, just asking them, you know, how many more do you think you could have done on that, and how hard was that out of 10, and just so they get that backlog of data themselves. So then when we do, say in 3-4 months time, say, right, we're going to do a RPE 8, this is the first time you're going to do this, and then you've got that backlog of data internally. And I think that's the important part with RPE, right? It's like, if you haven't got that, it's so hard to do, you know?
Yeah. For the blocks of training that I've done for the powerlifting club, the first month before, I did play around with. I tried not to use to RPE. I was just like, exactly as you said. How many reps do you reckon you could have got more on that? And then because they've got the results from that block, the next block, I've just written the reps just to be like, right, you know what you have done in the past. Let's see how it is, and then they'll naturally sort of, I've got a couple of guys and women that'll come up and naturally say, oh, I maybe think I could have got two or three reps out. And encouraging them to record their lifts as well and actually look back and be like, right, that moved about, that moved really, really slowly. It took you 5 minutes to do it. That was maybe a little bit harder. But I think as well, just touching on that on a little bit of a tangent, recording your lifts is a good marker of looking at the intensity of your lifts and just seeing how it actually feels. Because if you've got yourself psyched up for a lift and actually it moved really, really slowly, it might be right. That could be a good marker of overshooting it.
Yeah, definitely.
So a topic that sort of, again, going back to training and on the platform, sort of the whole listening to music, smelling salts, all that sort of stuff. Some people use everything. Everyone will go out, all right, I'm going to get smelling salts, I'm going to listen to loads of music. What are your thoughts on that, and what do you recommend to your lifters or people listening?
Yeah, I always say sort of just like you'll find what works for you eventually, and don't feel like inclined to stick with that all the time. Like when I first started, when I was like 19, 20 and started taking powerlifting like properly seriously, I would use literally everything, you know, smelling salts, getting smacked about, music, like running around like a madman. And it worked at the time. And it was like, and at the time I got as much out of that, but as what I do now and what I get out of, and I don't use smelling salts anymore. I just sit there and I almost have like this switch of, all I ask my the coach, whoever's handling me, is like, let me know when it's the guy who's lifting now, there's two more than me. And then when they tell me that, that's where I'm like, right, music on, switch on, and just listen to it. And like, so I'm not wasting that energy of just like going around like a mad bull, you know, which I have done in the past. And I feel like I don't think I could handle a whole comp doing that anymore. Like, but when you're younger, like it's easier to do, you know. But yeah, just find what works for you. Whether it's like, personally, I just love music. I've got like 4 or 5 songs where they are my switch, and you know, it's just that's the switch to be. And for some people, that might be smelling salts. You know, straight when they get that smell, bang, right, that's now it's game time. You know, even so much so that I only use like these certain songs for certain heavy lifts in my gym, because I don't want to lose that intensity and that switch on. So it's just finding out what works for you, really. And like, even some people are like absolutely completely internal, doesn't mean that they're not switched on, you know. They're super controlled with it. And like Taylor Antwood's a really good example of that. Like, I look at him and everything he does is that I feel like he doesn't want to be there, like the way I look at it. But then once he's finished the lift, like, he's got quite a lot of emotion, and but he's clearly internalizing everything. And then once it's finished, it's, you know, that's when it's comes out. But it depends on the lifter. Personally, I like the more intense lifters. They're way more they're way more fun to watch, but like, as a powerlifting perspective. But you do whatever works for you, really.
I'm in agreement when you say coming out, it does make it a lot more interesting to watch. But probably from a coach's point of view, it's okay not to be like that, because exactly as you said, sometimes you look at some lifters and they're like, do you want to go home, or do you want to call it a day? not really bothered. But yeah, as a powerlifting fan, if you like, it is as a spectacle. It is good to watch. What are your thoughts on touching on the nutrition or the nutritional side of things? Sort of pre-workout in training, the pre-workout maybe before a lift or anything like that, and how does that affect intensity? And is that a fair reflection? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think pre-workout, or whether it's caffeine, like beta-alanine, whatever it is for before workout, I think it's like, use it wisely and identify when, like, I have this thought of, you should be able to do your program on the worst day of your life. You know, like, even if it feels horrible and it feels like a 10, like an RP 10 instead of an RP 8, you should be able to, 9 times out of 10 complete that program. If you're going into a session and you almost can't complete it just because you haven't had your pre-workout, like, that pre-workout's hindering you now. You know, it's like, you're so reliant on it that you're going to want to take a step back and almost wean off it, so that you can actually get the effects of that, where sometimes people rely too much on it. It's useful, but it's only useful if it has a positive effect after ingestion. You know, like, if it's just keeping you in maintenance, you're probably literally just used to that caffeine intake or that whatever it is, and it's just you're hindered by it. Like, I'll take, like, I just like coffee. That's my problem. So I probably have more caffeine than I need to. But I'll go into, I make sure that if I'm going into a heavy day and I'm going, I need caffeine, unless it's like the final couple of weeks where I'm wrecked anyway before comp, like, that's a sign to me that I need to wean off it a little bit, and then I'll maybe go on to like even like some decaf coffee during the day just for a couple of weeks. So I know that when I take it back, especially for comp day, it's I'm there and I can utilize it rather than having to need it, you know.
Yeah, I think sometimes people go down the route that they take so much of it, you know, whether it is, you know, caffeine or pre-workout, whatever it is, that the actual benefits of it they don't really get the benefits of it anymore. They just sort of taking for you know, potentially taking sake. But yeah, you know, it's an interesting thing of, you'll see people coming in and they'll, you know, smash loads, but I need this for this workout. And yeah, actually, you know, it's a really good point what you've said there of, you should be able to do that program, because if supplements were taken away completely, then you're just left with yourself. You know, you've still got to be able to lift it. So going, obviously you touched on it at the start. A great bench presser. Always been your strongest lift. And this is more so sort of from questions, because I mentioned to a couple of beginner powerlifters that I train that was going to chat to you. The arch in the bench. Okay. Yeah. I'll admit my arch in the bench is, I think you'd struggle to fit a ruler underneath my back. But how important is the setup on bench for the arch, and how actually important is the arch in bench press?
Yeah, I think they're equal to each other, really. Like, I think when you're talking about your setup is like finding consistency again. Like, you know, if you're not consistent with your setup, especially on bench press, like if your shape is different every single time, you're going to be touching in a different place on your chest every time. Your tightness is going to be different. Scap retraction might be a little bit less or more. So the setup is super important. Like, I'm finding what works well, and finding that, and what I mean by works well is like, essentially, you're going to find, if you're looking to build your arch, you're going to find what is going to give you the most thoracic arch, like, so through your upper back. And that's the bit that I see a lot of new lifters not doing, is like, especially ladies, because ladies just generally are more flexible. You can get a lumbar arch very easily just by pushing your hips forwards. But if you have a look at the point of contact on the bench with like your lats and shoulders, it's almost down at the sort of the tip of the wing on your lat, like really low down, which at that point then you're limiting your range, but also you're limiting the amount of, you know, contraction you can get through that lat as well, because obviously most of it's flat on the bench almost, and you're just pushing your lumbar up. And when you do that, you're not getting any chest height, because if your hips are high, that means your belly might be high, but your chest isn't. So you're just like, you're in a position which, from the side on a Instagram video, it might look like you've got a good arch, but but biomechanically, it's not doing anything to shorten that range of motion. So thoracic flexibility and point of contact on the bench with like your upper back. That's why, if anyone's seen the way I bench, like I get up onto my face essentially. The reason I do that isn't anything else, but I know that when I drop my head down, the top of my, like almost the top of my spine is the first thing to make contact with the bench. Then a tiny bit of my shoulders, and then once I feel those shoulders touch the bench, I'm gonna try and get my bum to the floor without losing any of that shape. You know? So you will lose a little bit of it, but that's generally like what the setup, and you can either set up the way I do it, or you can find a way that is beneficial for you.
The thing there, like obviously going through your routine, the checklist of what you need to do. A lot of people will be like, right, squat and deadlift. Right, these are your cues, these are your setups all the time. When you know people set up for bench, I know I've had to work quite hard on my bench setup and just making sure everything's the same. But sometimes when people are coming in, it's like, you know, just because you're just all you're doing, you think of it as just bringing it down to your chest and pressing it back up. Like there is a lot more to it. So yeah, exactly as you said, get that set up and get it nailed all the time, because you will find that, you know, when people are, like I mentioned about squat and deadlift, they'll do the same thing all the time. So yeah, do the exact same thing all the time for your bench press. How do you go about coaching or building an arch or coaching people's setup? And do you have any go-to cues that you use?
Yeah, first things I'll do mainly is like just run people through a good warm-up. I think a lot of times, like you said, exactly like you're saying, hit the nail on the head, is like people come into bench and I feel like they don't take like the mobilizing and the setup as seriously as you would squat and deadlift. Like if you don't warm up for squats and you just jump in and go empty bar 70, 120, 175, like you will feel shit by the time you get to your top set. Yeah. But bench, you can sort of get away with it because your range of motion might be a little bit smaller, but it doesn't feel as bad. It just feels might be a little bit off. So I run people through like T-spine mobility, but as well as like really making sure like your hip flexors are nice and loose, because generally lower body, if your lower body is tight, you can't get that like pelvis up, so you can't create that sort of decline movement. So I run people through a good like T-spine and lower body mobility for bench, where most people don't do that. You know, they don't do a lower body. And then just generally, depending on the lifter, obviously just see where they are with their position and try and get them to be up on their upper back. The main thing I really like doing with a lot of lifters who want to come and improve their arch is doing almost like a decline bench. So, but not on a decline bench, on a normal bench, but put in, say, like a boxing glove under their bum, or just like one plate under their bum, because it really helps with proprioception of feeling where and how it feels to do an arched bench when you get to that higher position. Because what you'll find is it feels a hell of a lot different. It almost does feel like a decline bench. But so you can put the plate or the roller or something underneath the bum, and then it forces that shear angle down onto the upper back. So it forces you to move in a way when you would have the mobility to have a bigger arch. Oh, okay. A similar one I do to that as well, but for a more advanced lifter, would be same thing, but jam a roller, sort of get them to put their set up, and then jam a foam roller like right into their upper back, so that it's stopping the rib cage from like folding down, so that they're forced to stay high. It's uncomfortable and it doesn't feel massively nice, but that would be the progression from having it under your bum, you know. So under the bum is a nice one for brand new lifters who are looking to get an arch to get the proprioception. And it's more, that's the bit that I would say, it's more to do with proprioception and how the bench feels and motor pattern and skill acquisition, instead of, let's put this under your bum because it's going to help you lift more, or put it under your bum so we can get your chest higher. It's not about that. It's about learning the movement rather than actually, you know, getting more weight on the bar at the time, you know.
That's interesting because, you know, a lot of people will, a lot of the beginner lifters that'll come in, will ask me about it, and I might use that in my next next session. It's it'll be interesting, that, because, you know, sometimes you're trying to you'll use different things and like think about pulling your chest up to the bar and also all those sort of cues. But it's a great point that you touched on there about at the end of the day, they've got to be able to feel how it is. You can give all the coaching cues in the world, but if they're not feeling how it's supposed to feel, then you're just sort of always having an uphill struggle. Do you have any variations, or obviously variation there of putting the plate underneath the bum when they're lifting? Do you have any other variations that you might use, or are those sort of your go-to?
Yeah, those are go-to. Like anything when you're learning a new motor skill, I like doing like tempo bench. So like 5 seconds down, like you're saying, like the key part with the arch bench is making sure that chest stays nice and high, because if you're losing that chest height, you're going to get that change in arm angle. You're going to lose a lot of tightness. So that's like quite key. So with a tempo bench, obviously that's what you can think about. As well as I like doing like a double pause. So you pause like almost in a spot up position.
Yeah.
And then almost from that pause, I tell people, don't think about bringing the bar to the chest. Think about bringing the chest to the bar. So from pause one, it's almost, the bar is going down, but you're meeting the bar halfway with the chest.
Yeah.
And then you press in. So it just helps people keep that chest high in the final few inches, which is where most people fall apart on the heavier loads, you know. But yeah, they would be my main go-tos, as well as, I think simple things like extended pause benches, just because, again, under the heavier loads, it's, if the call is a little bit longer than you think, that's where you're going to get that fold in, you know.
Yeah. One of the main things that I thought when you're mentioning there about sort of T-spine mobility and your hips, what is it that you would use? Because sometimes, exactly as you said, people will come in and they'll just lie down on the bench and, I'm going to start benching today. Is there any exercises that you would use for that? Because obviously you'll see that most people will come in, they might, roll their upper back and do some band pull aparts. But then that's it, and then they'll go into benching. Is there anything else that you would recommend, a little bit more thorough, if you like?
Yeah, I like doing like cat camels, threading the eye of the needle. So you sort of you're in a sort of cat camel position, then your hand goes between your leg and your leg on your other hand. Just Google threading the eye of the needle, you'll find it. And anything really that just mobilizes through that upper, even like when you're saying just rolling on a roller a little bit, I got sometimes in between sets, I'll just say, put a heavy kettlebell behind you, hold on to the heavy kettlebell, and then keep your upper back on the roller and just relax as much as you can until your bum slowly drops and stays on the floor. So you're just trying to like almost open up a little bit more. But yeah, I like just anything realistically similar. Like the best things I would say is, if you have a look at like yoga sequences for when you people who have desk jobs and have rounded upper backs, they're going to be really good movements for what you're looking to do, because you're looking to do exactly what that is trying to achieve, and you're trying to pick that chest up and stop that stoop. So anything there that's going to help with that mobilization is useful.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I'm sure you'll have clients and lifters yourself that come in that they will be sat at a desk, sat at work for X amount of hours of the day, and it is trying to open that up a little bit. Obviously, everyone listening, there is quite a lot more to bench than just lying down and pressing. I know from my point of view, 100% my bench needs to get better, so I'll be trying out a few of them myself. The last question on bench press, sort of, obviously you mentioned at the start, Worlds in June. How much more can you push your bench press? What is how much more is there? What are you aiming to push with? Because obviously a monster bench at the minute, or are you just taking it as it comes?
We'll see. I think Worlds, realistically, it'll be, depending on where I am on the other two, it could just be like building my total. I think I would like to hold my bench world record. Just make sure Brett doesn't take that again. Off. So I think I am capable of. My goal, my long-term goal is 500 pounds at 83. Like that's what I want to do. It's just 227, right? I think I could do that as an 83. Just probably not this year, but but yeah, like anywhere. I sort of my thought would be anywhere around the 220 mark, 217. I'd be happy with, maybe even a little bit more. But I think this cycle, I think it's really important for me that my lower body lifts come up more than my bench. You know, like even if I benched 217, but I squatted 290 and deadlifted 300, that would be a massive achievement compared to squatting 280, deadlifting 290, but benching 222. You know, like I think this cycle is it's more important for my lower body lifts to catch up with everyone else than it is to add more to my bench.
Yeah, you know, when you said at the start about, you know, totaling over 800, and as you're speaking there, it'll be awesome to see because, you can sort of hear that you're quite focused on hitting that. So, 100% it'll be interesting to see in June. We touched on it a little bit. Obviously, you mentioned that you always had the goal of getting involved in nutrition, and we touched a little bit on supplements there. I find it quite funny. It's sort of I sort of relate this to like old school props in rugby union. There aren't really any old school props anymore. All of them are, you know, they are athletes now. You can call them. Sorry for any props or hookers that are. But powerlifters now are, you know, they are taking a little bit more time over looking after their nutrition a little bit more, rather than just, you know, trying to get as much food in as they can to be as heavy as they can to lift what they you know, want to lift on the platform. So what guidelines do you follow or do you coach for lifters? You know, either, you know, maintaining a weight or staying in shape. What are the guidelines that you use?
Yeah, generally sort of like it obviously it depends on the lifter and their size, their muscle mass, all that sort of stuff. But I'd always say to every lifter, like, try and do some tracking, like whether it's through like MyFitnessPal or whatever. Even if you can't do it all the time, like 1 week a month is the minimum you should do, just to make up, like, you know, if you're looking to put on weight and you can't put on weight, and then you track for a week and you realize, oh, actually, I don't eat as much as I should be eating. Just eat more. Likewise with if you're looking to maintain muscle mass and you track for a week and you realize you're eating 100 grams of protein a day and you're 150 kilos of body weight, that's not enough, you know. Like, so I sort of say to people, like, try and aim for 2 grams of protein per kilo of body weight. Like, that's generally a decent start point. And then time your carbs around your training, low fat, high carb around training, so before and after, medium protein. And then the rest of the day, to start with, just do what you want to do and try, you know, make sure you're hitting your calorie intake. And then week on week, look to find an improvement every week. So whether it is, after week 1, training's going well, carbs around training's working well, I'm hitting my protein, but I'm maybe I need to be lighter than I am. Right, I just got to maybe drop my calories out a bit, prioritize my calories around training. So I'm not going to drop anything out of there, but I might have to take a little bit out because I'm 4 kilos above where I need to be. So I need to drop down. I need to be X weight by next week, and then have a timeline. I think a lot of people forget that, is whether you're looking to gain weight, maintain weight, or drop. Like when you're doing programming, you know that next week is it's going to be my doubles, or a week after that it's going to be, I know what my timeline is up towards comp. And some people, they won't do that for nutrition. They'll just be like, I need to be 57 kilos by June. So, well, that's 6 months away. A lot can happen in that time. So if you break it down where you go, right, I'll maintain for the next 4 weeks because training is quite hard, so I don't want to drop anything, but then I got a deload, and then it's a little bit easier for a few weeks. You identify that point and you go, right, that's when I'm going to go into a deficit because training isn't as hard. And then leading into comp, I do say to like most of my guys, if possible, leading into comp, like the final 3-4 weeks, you want to be trying to increase your calories because things are getting more intense. So talking about that timeline, if you manage to go, right, I've got 14 weeks now, it might feel like it's ages away, but I'm going to get my ass into gear now. Like, but I'm a perfect example of that. Like now, for the next 4 weeks, I'm going to look to drop like 3 kilos. So I'm going to drop down to like the 84 mark, because I know my training it's building, but it's not full on yet. And I know come like May, end of April, I'm going to want those extra calories because it's going to be full on. So I can drop to 84 and then build back up to sort of 85, 85 and a half. And then it's easy to drop down from there then the final sort of 10 days. So yeah, it's I would say like treat your nutrition as the same you would with your training and sort of almost periodize it in a way, you know?
Yeah, I think, you know, going back to the first sort of couple of questions that we talked about in terms of intensity. If you're struggling with your food, you are going to be tired. That's the fuel for your body. When you're saying about that basing your food around your training, it makes sense. It makes sense really. But a lot of people sometimes will play around with stuff, and they'll either they'll undereat or not get enough of what they need. Obviously nutrition isn't my specialist area, but I'll help people along. And if you're having a deload week, maybe you can drop down your food if you need to drop some weight down or anything like that. What are your thoughts on if people are looking on their muscle mass or looking at how much food they're eating? Does that sometimes dictate or point you in the direction that actually these should either drop down a weight class or increase a weight class? Or is it just a case of they just need to get some more food to fill out that weight class? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's a case-by-case basis for that. I think you have to look at the person. See, a lot of people straight away, like, especially new to the sport, you see a lot, sitting at 78 kilos. I'm definitely going to be at 74. Or like, you see people like, I'm 90 kilos now, but I want to compete as an 83. It's like, well, let's just enjoy powerlifting first and get into the sport. Like, you haven't even competed yet. Don't worry about a weight class. Those beginners, I sort of say, like, let's just do it as a 93. Let's enjoy the sport. And you never know. You fuel yourself. You have the right training. You could put 100 kilos on your total in no problem, like easily. Like I got one guy who he came to me and he was like 107, but he's like 6'3" or whatever. He's huge. You're going to be a 120. You're 19 and you're 107 kilos. You're going to be a 120. And in a year's time now, he's say 115 kilos, I think now. So he's put a bit on, but he's put 125 kilos on his total in 10 months. So it's like, if you were trying to drop down, I guarantee you would not have put that on your total. And like, you're 10 kilos heavier, but now your numbers look great as a 120. So new lifters, don't worry about a weight class. And then the more intermediate you get, I think you should only, like, powerlifting is an amateur sport. Like, we don't get anything from it. And the only time you should really worry about what grade classes you're in is either a personal challenge of like, I want to lose some body weight. And sometimes a weight class is a nice target for that. So, if you're a female and you're 66 kilos, you don't want to be a 72. So I'm going to use this challenge to change my body composition. That's fine. But don't think, I got to be a 63 because I'm not good enough as a 72. Like, unless you're in with a chance of getting, say, top 5 in Britain as a 63, why drop down? Like, if you don't want to drop down and you don't feel like you need to, don't do it. The only time I would say that it's worthwhile is if your numbers are pretty good. So sitting at 78 kilos and your numbers would be great as a 74. We might go, right, let's see if we can drop down, because you might be in the chance of whether it's British team or getting top 3 at a nationals, whatever. Like, body weight is, I think most of the time I say, like, as a beginner, don't worry about it. The better you get, if you want a personal challenge, then, pick one, that's totally fine, and we'll go towards that. But it's what I would say on top of that then is like you're saying with training, like there's parts of training when you're doing some hypertrophy and you're doing some more rep work, will tailor your nutrition and be like, right, let's eat into this, and let's just try and build some muscle mass. And then when we drop down a little bit, we can go into a bit of a deficit. Like it's what you do with body composition change. You can't be married to one single weight when you're trying to become, get into some bodybuilding and get into great shape. If you haven't got the muscle mass, you're going to look like shit. It's the same thing with powerlifting, really, but not as specific. But you can't be married to your weight class at all times. There are going to be times where you'll shoot above it. There will be times you'll be a little bit under, but that's needed for strength gain and for body composition change.
Yeah, I think when you mention to people about getting in and competing first, the first thing that they do say is oh well, what weight class would I be in? I want to do this, I want to do that. The weight class is just look, it's so that it's a level playing field for people who are similar to you. There's all the time in the world to move through weight classes or do whatever it is. It's funny you mentioned about the guy that you said who weighed at 107. I competed at my first British last year. Obviously saw you compete there on the Saturday as well. Before that, I competed in the 105s and was just sort of like ticking along. Went up to the 120s. And managed to get a qualifying total and move up to the British. So the weight thing isn't. I don't think it should be an issue unless, like you say, you actually want to drop a little bit of weight. But in terms of strength, like my numbers shot up massively. The only thing now is I'm the only 120 lifter in the gym. So I might have to look at dropping down a little bit. So. Quite a lot of topics covered there. Absolutely, really enjoyed the chat with you. For everyone listening, what would be your take-home points or words of wisdom that we've through all the topics that we've chatted through today?
Yeah, I think the main thing is like consistency. No matter what you do, I think I probably said that in each thing we've gone through is like consistency is key. Whether it's nutrition, whether it's your setup, bench press, intensity, whatever it is, like the more consistent you are, the less things are going to go wrong. So I that's probably what the main thing I would take away. And it's like, don't panic if you feel like you're nowhere near as good as what other people are. Like when I first started, I was nowhere near. Like I see guys now who are juniors and sub juniors out totaling what I did when I was their age by 100 kilos. But then they drop off because they feel like they're not top of the world yet. Like my first international, I came last by probably 80 kilos on my total. But I got there and I enjoyed the experience. And then every year just crept up. And then eventually you get that breakthrough and you're in there. And that's only done with just consistency and chipping away,
Yeah, I think that's the key for anything. As long as you, the more times that you drift in and out, the less progress you're going to make. So for everyone listening who might want to ask you any questions or potentially get involved with coaching with you, where can people find you and see the content that you put out there?
Yeah, just go on my Instagram, which is at Ohub. Just go on that and you'll find everything on there, really. Like my coaching side of things, I do in-gym stuff in Bournemouth, in a gym 180 strength that I run as well, so give them a follow. But apart from that, like my online stuff, I'm hopefully gonna have some space for some more clients soon, but I'm not taking anyone on right now, just because
everyone hold off sending Owen emails then. Don't everyone's
just give me an email if you're interested, because I'm sort of keen to get more, but I'm also aware of I don't want to overpromise, underdeliver. I believe that everyone should have the same good experience of coaching, and until I have more time to do it, I don't want to, you know, give you a undervalued service, you know. But yeah, hopefully I'll be able to find some more time for that in the long run.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for taking the time to chat with me today. Really enjoyed the chat. I hope everyone enjoyed that as much as I did. Thanks again, Owen. And for everyone listening, I will see you all next week.